he survived the war. So why didn't he survive coming home? He came home in October. The flight landed at 6:47 in the morning. His family was waiting at the gate. His mother, his younger sister, his girlfriend of 3 years. When he walked out, his mother grabbed him so hard she left marks on his jacket. His little sister cried. His girlfriend just kept saying his name, over and over, like she was making sure he was real. He smiled. He hugged them back. He said, "I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay." 14 months later, he was gone. Not from a bullet, not from an IED, not from anything that happened over there. He died in his own bedroom, in the house he grew up in, 31 years old, and his family still can't answer the question that keeps them awake at night. He survived the war, so why didn't he survive coming home? Every single day in the United States, approximately 17 to 22 veterans die by suicide. Let that number settle for a moment. 17 to 22. That's more than the number of active duty service members killed in combat. The war ended for them. They came back. They were safe. And yet, statistically, the battlefield was not the most dangerous place they would ever be. Their own mind was. How is that possible? How does someone survive firefights, explosions, months in a combat zone, and then come home to a quiet house, a soft bed, the people who love them, and still lose? To understand this, we have to go back. Not to the war, to the moment the war ended, because that moment, the moment the gun goes silent, is not the moment the soldier becomes safe. It is often the moment they become most vulnerable. The mission is over. The brain doesn't know that. Think about what the brain of a combat veteran has been through. For months, sometimes years, the nervous system has been locked into a single mode, survival. Every shadow is a threat. Every sound triggers a scan. Every unfamiliar face is processed through a filter of danger. The amygdala, that small almond-shaped alarm system deep in the brain, has been firing so consistently that it has essentially rewired itself. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. The brain physically changes under sustained stress. Neural pathways that were used constantly, threat detection, rapid response, emotional suppression, become faster, thicker, more automatic. Pathways that weren't needed, empathy processing, future planning, emotional vulnerability, become thinner, slower, less accessible. The brain became optimized for war, and then the plane lands, and the family is there, and there's a homecoming banner, and someone has baked a cake, and the neighborhood looks exactly the same as it always did. And the brain, this brain that has spent the last 14 months learning one thing very well, doesn't know what to do with any of it. Because the brain doesn't get a memo saying, the mission is over. You can stand down now. The body is home. But the nervous system is still deployed. There's a particular cruelty in this gap. The people who love the veteran can see, with their own eyes, that he is safe. The house is the same. The street is the same. There is no enemy here. And so naturally, they expect him to feel safe too. But feeling safe is not a choice. It is a neurological state. And the veteran's nervous system, which spent over a year being conditioned to never feel safe, cannot simply switch off because the geography changed. The brain doesn't understand geography, it understands patterns. And the pattern it learned was, danger is everywhere. Stay alert. Don't let your guard down. That pattern runs deep, deeper than logic, deeper than love. And so the veteran sits at the kitchen table in the house he grew up in, surrounded by people who would die for him, and his nervous system is still scanning the room for exits. The invisible weight. There's a veteran named Marcus. He served 2 tours in Iraq. When he came home, his wife said he seemed like a different person. Not angry, not violent, just absent. He would sit at the dinner table with his kids, and his eyes were somewhere else. He would laugh at things they said, but the laugh never quite reached his face. He would hold his daughter, and she would feel him tense up every time a car backfired on the street outside. He wasn't unhappy exactly, he just wasn't there. His wife described it this way. It was like living with someone who was watching their own life through glass. He could see us, he just couldn't reach us. Psychologists have a name for this: emotional numbing. It is one of the most common and least understood symptoms of post-traumatic stress, and it is one of the most dangerous. Because emotional numbing doesn't look like distress, it doesn't look like crisis, it looks like someone who is fine. It looks like someone who has adjusted. Meanwhile, inside, something very different is happening. Marcus's wife said something else in an interview years later that has never left me. She said, "The hardest part wasn't that he had changed. The hardest part was that he didn't seem to know it. He thought he was acting normal. He thought we were the ones who were different." This is one of the deepest traps of emotional numbing. The person experiencing it often has no reference point for how far they've drifted. The new normal feels like the only normal, and the people around them, who still remember who they were before, are left trying to reach across a distance that the veteran cannot even see. The chemistry of disconnection. When the brain is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, it begins to compensate. To prevent burnout, it suppresses emotional responses, turning down the volume on feelings. This mechanism, vital in combat, prevents being overwhelmed by horror. But the brain cannot selectively mute. It mutes everything: joy, love, and fear. The same shutdown that enabled survival now makes genuine connection impossible. Connection, a powerful protective factor against suicide, begins to collapse when it's missing. Neuroscientists call the system governing social connection the social engagement system, governed by the vagus nerve. When functioning well, it allows us to feel connection, safety, and comfort from others. But chronic trauma dysregulates the vagus nerve. The social engagement system goes offline. Faces stop triggering warmth, voices safety, touch comfort. Love is present, but unfelt. This is not a character failure. It's a physiological injury, as real as a broken bone, yet invisible. The burden no one talks about. Another element rarely discussed is moral injury. Moral injury differs from PTSD. PTSD is fear-based. Moral injury is a wound from violating one's deepest sense of right and wrong. It's the soldier who followed a wrong order, the medic who couldn't save someone. It's realizing that part of what they did doesn't fit any story they can tell. Jonathan Shea described moral injury as the destruction of what's right. When a person's moral framework is shattered, the wound goes deeper than fear. How do you heal from believing you are unworthy of healing? How do you face people who see you as a hero when you carry something that feels like the opposite? A voice inside says, "They don't know what I did. They don't know who I became." This voice often gets louder once the soldier comes home. In the field, there was no time for reflection. The mission demanded everything. But at home, in the quiet, the things that couldn't be felt during the war start finding their way through. This is why many veterans describe the first year home as the hardest, the moment the mask slips. Most struggling veterans don't say so. In military culture, survival depended on not showing weakness. Admitting fear was dangerous. That training doesn't disappear when the uniform comes off. Veterans carry enormous weight quietly. They say, "I'm fine," because that's what they learned. How do you explain feeling hollowed out, refilled with something you don't recognize? How do you say, "I came back, but I'm not sure the person who left is the person who returned"? The mask stays on, sometimes out of love, not wanting to burden those relieved you're alive. There's a particular loneliness in being celebrated for survival, while privately unsure if you truly survived. Research shows the highest risk period for veteran suicide is not immediately after return, but months or years later. Initial homecoming is filled with activity and attention. But then daily life reasserts itself. The attention fades. People stop asking. The world moves on. The veteran is left alone. What the numbers don't tell you. Veterans who deploy to combat zones don't have significantly higher rates of suicide. It's not simply combat exposure. Something else is happening. Factors include disruption of identity, loss of purpose, severing of unit bond, and difficulty transitioning. In the military, your role is clear, your mission defined, your unit your family. Then you are discharged, handed civilian clothes and told, "Figure out what you're going to do." Sebastian Junger argues a deep crisis is the absence of meaning and belonging in peacetime. Humans are built for interdependence, which combat paradoxically provides. At home, that interdependence disappears. No one needs you in the grocery store or traffic. The soldier with clear identity and purpose now has none of those things. The brain, adapted to war's intensity, is adrift in ordinary existence. Psychologists call this anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. Food tastes flat, music sounds empty. The world loses its texture. And when the world loses its texture, the question creeps in, what exactly am I staying for? The night it gets closest. Researchers describe what they call a crisis cascade, a sequence of events that moves from chronic pain to acute risk. It often begins with isolation. The veteran pulls back from family and friends, not dramatically, just gradually. Then comes hopelessness. The quiet belief that things will not get better, that this numbness, disconnection, is permanent. Then comes thwarted belongingness. The feeling that you do not belong anywhere anymore, that no one would truly miss you, that you have become a burden rather than a presence. And because the veteran has been trained to endure, these feelings often don't look like crisis. They look like quiet. People around them don't see the danger because the veteran has become expert at concealment. The last conversations friends and families describe often sound the same. He seemed better. She seemed calmer. He was making plans. What they didn't know is that the decision itself sometimes brings a kind of relief, a sense that there is finally an end in sight that can look like peace. Joiner's research identified acquired capability, the belief, born from training, from experience with death, that one is capable of following through. Most people, when they imagine harming themselves, are held back partly by fear, by the body's own resistance to its destruction. But a soldier trained to override fear, who has been in situations where death was close, may no longer have that same resistance. The war, in this sense, becomes part of what makes the crisis possible, not because it made them want to die, but because it made them less afraid to. What we get wrong. When we talk about veteran suicide, we tend to frame it as a mental health problem. Fund more therapy, build more hotlines, reduce the stigma around seeking help. These things matter. But researchers and veterans push back on this framing. Because framing it purely as a mental health problem puts the entire weight of the crisis on the individual veteran. It says, you are broken and we need to fix you. But what if the veteran isn't the broken thing? What if the problem is also the world they came home to? David Brooks wrote about the social recession, the collapse of community, belonging, and shared purpose that used to hold people together. Church attendance down, union membership down, civic organizations down, neighborhoods where people actually know each other down. Veterans are coming home from one of the most intense forms of human togetherness, the combat unit, into one of the loneliest societies. And we are handing them a phone number to call and wondering why it isn't enough. The ones who make it. There are veterans who come home from the worst things imaginable and find their way through. They are worth studying. What they have in common is not simply better treatment or genes or less trauma. What they tend to have in common is connection. Not just therapy, though therapy matters. Not just medication, though medication matters. A person, or a group of people, who know what they've been through, or who don't need to know, but are simply and consistently present. Veterans, service organizations, peer support groups, mission-based nonprofits that give veterans purposeful work, these show promising outcomes. Not because they fix the brain chemistry, but because they recreate, in some form, the thing the military provided that civilian life so often doesn't. Belonging, purpose, the sense that someone would notice if you were gone. One veteran described it. I didn't need someone to fix me. I needed someone to sit with me in it. There is also research around the role of meaning-making in recovery. Veterans who construct a narrative around their experience show better outcomes. This is not the same as saying the war was good. It is the difference between a wound that has a story and a wound that is just a wound. A scar you understand is different from a scar you can't explain. And the veterans who find their way back often describe the same thing. Not that the pain went away, but that it became something they could carry rather than something that was carrying them. The question that remains. Back to the man who came home in October. His family has spent years going back through everything. Every conversation, every dinner, every moment they wish they had asked a different question. His mother keeps a photo from the homecoming on her mantle. He is smiling. His arms are around his sister and his girlfriend. He looks relieved. She says, "He was so happy to be home." I really believe that. I think he was genuinely happy that day. And then she says something that stays with you. But I think he also knew, somewhere in his mind, that he had come home to a world that didn't have a place for who he'd become. We loved him. We loved the him we knew, but we didn't know how to love the him that came back. And I'm not sure he knew how to let us. This is the wound beneath the wound. The soldier trained for years to become someone who could survive the unsurvivable. And survival required becoming someone different. Someone harder, more closed, more capable of things the person who left home could never have imagined. And then the war ends, and that person, the harder transformed person, comes home to a world that wants the original back. That needs the original. That doesn't have language for or space for who the war made them. So the veteran tries to become who they were, and discovers they can't, and carries that failure in silence. Because there is no ceremony for this, no ritual that marks the transition from soldier to civilian, no communal moment where society looks the veteran in the eye and says, "We know what we asked of you. We know what it cost. We see who you are now, not just who you were." In many traditional cultures, returning warriors went through extended transition rituals. Not because the culture feared them, but because the culture understood that they had crossed a threshold that required acknowledgement. We don't do that. We throw a parade and hand them a DD-214 and call it a homecoming. Every day, in America, 17 to 22 veterans die by suicide. Most of them had people who loved them. Most of them would have said, if asked, that they were fine. Most of them survived the thing that was supposed to kill them. And the question that their families are left with, the question that no statistic answers, that no hotline resolves, that sits permanently at the bottom of every conversation about this crisis, is the same question. He survived the war, so why didn't he survive coming home? Maybe the real question isn't what went wrong inside him. Maybe the real question is what we built for him to come home to, and whether, if we're honest, it was ever really enough.